Hello and welcome, students of NKT. This is another episode of Test, Don't Guess. I'm really excited to have on today Skye and Kim. Guys, thanks so much for being here. These guys run their own Functional Body Institute down in Tempe, Arizona, where NKT is the core of their practice. Guys, thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Now, you guys just did an NKT level 1, did you not?
That is correct.
Congratulations on that. That was your first one, I think, that you taught?
That was the first one I taught, yes.
Awesome. That's super cool. Well, guys, I'm excited to have both of you on today. Got some different perspectives, and I've heard there's some interesting stories with the two of you, so I'm really excited about that. Skye, maybe you can go first and kind of lead me through how you first heard about NKT and got involved with NKT.
Well, I first got into NKT from a personal need myself. I had a C-section with my first baby, and fast forward 7 years, I lost the use of my right leg. I was doing a Pilates move, had a pop in the lower right abdominal area. After that, I could barely walk, and it seemed like my right leg had just completely shut off. I had tried all types of different modalities to get myself better. Nothing seemed to really work. I did a lot of research online and asking other people in the health and wellness industry to try to assist me in finding help. I stumbled across NKT. I found one of the 3 practitioners in the state of Arizona at the time. He fixed me in 15 minutes.
Wow.
So I went from not really being able to do my job, teaching spin class, teaching Pilates, being a stretch therapist, to getting on the spin bike the next day within 24 hours and teaching a class as if nothing ever happened. And it ended up being my C-section scar was my facilitator for many, many muscles in my body. So that's how I personally got into it, and it totally blew my mind. And I had to learn it and, get up on a soapbox and preach it at that point, because it was so profound and changed for me personally.
Pretty dramatic.
Yeah, it's amazing. How long ago was that?
I believe, my memory's not the best right now, but I believe it was about 4 years ago.
Okay. And so then, did you take NKT level 1 right after that, or?
That happened in March 4 years ago, and the next level 1 was actually scheduled in Phoenix for October. So I took it in October, about 6 months later.
Okay.
5 years, actually.
Yeah, it might be 5 years, might be 4. 4-ish years ago.
Okay.
Possibly 5.
Sometime in the past.
We have a baby that wakes us up a lot.
Oh, yeah. I don't know anything about that, but now, Ken, tell me your story a little bit of how you kind of learned of NKT. I mean, through Skye, I would assume, but then what was your kind of leading into becoming a practitioner as well?
And maybe my aha moment.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, come from a nursing background. That's where my education is. Then I've been a programmer since I was 12. Actually, I saw Skye doing a session. Obviously, she had done a session on me before, but luckily, I have no type of chronic pain. Never have had any type of chronic pain. So thank you, God. And I could see where muscles got stronger and what have you, and it was like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but big deal. Some of the times I was like, well, you're pushing harder than you were this time, or something else. I was extremely skeptical about it. And we were at our facility, and I was actually changing a ballast out of one of the lights at the front desk. And I saw this woman come in on 2 canes. She came in the door on 2 canes and was just all grimacing and what have you. And I'd seen plenty of people go back and have stretch therapy and what have you with Skye. Fast forward to I was cleaning up everything and getting everything ready at the front desk, and I see this same woman walk out the front door with both canes up underneath her arm, just walking like normal.
No way.
And I was like, wait a minute, okay, because I saw her face. I saw how she was all crumpled over. and 2 canes. That's something you don't normally see, 2 canes, right? So I was like, okay, maybe I need to check this out. I did level 1. Honestly, I was going into level 1, and I wanted to see where I could find out what was going on here. How could I blow this apart? How much of this was placebo? But I got to see a lot of examples. Eric was awesome. And through those examples, in my experience, and actually being able to feel a neural lock and practicing on multiple different people, needless to say, by the end of that weekend, I was sold hook, line, and sinker. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah. And how long ago was that, or how long after Skye took it was that?
About 3 years ago.
Okay.
And by the time he got to level 3 with Eric and Thomas Wells, he was ready to start a church.
Awesome. It was about a third of the day through level 3. And Thomas is awesome.
Yeah.
He had somebody up on the table, and he walks up and he's like, okay, the problem here is blobbity blobbity blob, and the fix is and everybody's jaws on the floor, and I just stood up and I said, let's start a church. Because literally it looked miraculous. It looked like someone was laying hands on someone and healing them right in front of us. And so, yeah, after that, obviously, there was no turning back.
Okay, wow. So then, how have you guys, I mean, for you, Ken, it's had you really been doing like manual therapy and any of that before? You said you come from a nursing background, so have you transitioned out of that into doing NKT at the Institute, or do you still do nursing?
All I do is neurokinetic therapy. I do not do nursing. Have it in 20 years. Matter of fact, I started an ISP here in Phoenix in 1996. As a programmer, that's what fascinates me about NKT, because it's like I have an input-output interface to the motor control center of someone's brain, so I can hack the motor control center of their brain. That's the way I look at it. So it's kind of like the marriage of those two things, programming and that background that's come together for me. So yeah, that's all I do now is neurokinetic therapy.
Okay, wow. And then what was your progression going from level 1 all the way through to level 3? I mean, how long did it take for you guys to do that? And then what was kind of your experience in taking those other levels like?
For me, my wife was already level 3. And as soon as I could take the courses, I was taking them. So it took me about a year and a half to go through all 3.
For me, I took level 1. I was the 5th person in the state of Arizona to be NKT certified.
Wow.
I was totally deer in the headlights walking out of level 1. I'd been in the fitness industry for 20 plus years as a personal trainer, Pilates instructor, stretch therapist, what have you, but I'd never muscle tested. So for me, not only was I learning protocol, but I was actually learning muscle testing. And so I walked out of level 1, and come Monday, I was like, okay, well, I remember the ab test or whatever. So it took me about 6 months to really get comfortable with level 1. And I tested out, and then 2 months later, so 8 months from level 1 to level 2. Level 2 was still a little bit deer in the headlights for me. But I created study group in Phoenix and really started practicing with people who could give me feedback versus clients who have no idea. And then 6 months after level 2, I took level 3. And for me, level 3 is where it really hit home. And I felt like about an hour or 2 into level 3, it's like, yes, I got it. So, but you know, everybody's learning curve is a little bit different. But for me, it was taking level 3 where everything started truly making sense to me. And I felt really good about it, and, you know, very glad I did.
Okay. What were some of the things, kind of getting into like the obstacles, the stumbling blocks of learning NKT? I mean, like Ken, you were saying that you thought maybe it was placebo or you're pushing too hard or, and like for Skye, you said that when you got to level 3, it kind of made sense. What were some of those things that maybe were really confusing for you in taking NKT? Those things that like, oh, this, I don't understand what's happening right now. And it took you a long time maybe to understand those concepts. What were the
Well,
hard things in NKT?
for me, again, I had never muscle tested before. I've perfected my skill a lot since level 1. I really pushed hard in the beginning, and I didn't truly understand the concept of light pressure. So really fine-tuning how hard or light I would test was a challenge in the beginning because, again, we didn't have study group in Phoenix when I first took it. Level 1 has changed dramatically for the better since I took it, which is cool that we've evolved and learned how to make things better. I've TA'd probably maybe 10 level 1, so I've seen it kind of blossom and change and be better for the students to really grasp and absorb better in the workshop. So for me, it was really just practicing the different tests, figuring out how to test properly to get the true, is this really strong in the clear or weak in the clear, or is it me testing wrong? And, I recommend to anyone who's fresh out of level 1, find a mentor. My mentor saved me. If I would not have had a mentor, I wouldn't be sitting here right here today. I would have curled up in a corner and cried like a baby and quit. But I'm very thankful for my mentor, very thankful that David allowed us to start a study group here. Study groups are big time because it really helps you really get good at all the tests and to really just hone in and do repetition and protocol, because repetition is the mother of skill. The more you practice and mess up and learn from those mistakes, the better you're going to get.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that too. Touch was huge in the beginning. And when I took level 1, it was the ABA protocol. Wasn't called directional testing like it is now. For some reason, and I've seen this with many students after this, I knew it, and then like 20 or 30 minutes later, I didn't know it. And I could not understand why, and it was really driving me crazy because it's simple. The protocol is extremely simple. What was my problem? And I think the hang up a lot of people have is when you are determining if something has a relationship, there's the assumption that whatever was tight or whatever is what is facilitated. And not taking that next step to figure out what which one is facilitated, which one is inhibited. So there was that. The other problem for me was maybe a little more unique than other people, and it was the fact that I had my wife as a crutch. If I got to a sticking point, I was like, Skye, I'd call her in or whatever to help me. And I expressed this to some of the students this weekend and said, look, just press through. Do not fall back to what your old modalities and what have you were, because if you do, you will stick this on a shelf. You will wind up not using it. And if you're not doing this all the time through repetition, like she said, then you're going to forget it, or you're going to feel extremely confused, and then you're just going to want to fall back to what you know. So you'll start stretching, or you'll start doing some other kind of modality, what have you. So it wasn't until I said, no matter what, I'm not going to ask for her help. I'm not going to pull her in. I'm going to try and push through, that I really started getting it. And also that the level 3 with Thomas was pretty huge. That really, things really sunk in for me after that. So. That's what I think, probably the biggest hang-ups. Definitely, touch, the amount of touch, uh, the amount of time in between testing, something strong in the clear, weak in the clear versus testing in series. And that was really driven home in level 3 because I would go and test. Then we have the arm clock and what have you. I would go and I would test things pretty quickly together. And I found out that I was getting probably a lot of false readings because of that. So those are the three, I think, the three biggest things that were a drawback for me.
Yeah. Now, how did, I mean, this is a little bit more for you, Skye, since you had already been in practice for a long time, but how did your practice kind of change before, the before and after NKT? What were some of the really big differences? Oh, now that we do NKT, it's like we always do this or we never do these things. What are some of those big changes now?
Well, I mean, number one, we changed our whole entire business.
Mm-hmm.
And to where we force all of our personal trainers that, hey, if you want to work for us, you have to be NKT certified.
Oh, wow.
Because I realized, how am I going to personally train someone and have them do squats and lunges or whatever exercise, and I don't even know if their core is firing. I don't even know if the major movers of that movement are activated or not. And if I run them through a traditional workout program, am I just going to reinforce their compensation patterns, or are we actually going to get some functional movement within this session? So we really changed our entire business.
How much are we responsible for an injury that someone gets? If they've only got one glute firing and they're doing squats, if they only have one pec firing or one lat firing, bench presses, so that's huge. If not an acute short-term injury, definitely long-term, right? So yeah, we changed everything.
Yeah. Okay, and then run me through kind of what it's like, a day in the life of your office a little bit. When people come in and you have a new client, what are some of the first things you guys might do with them?
So most people come to us through word of mouth, which is cool. So they're already kind of expecting what they call the voodoo or the magic show. We run everybody through the same exact process. We're going to get a very thorough history because after going through level 3 and working on thousands of people, we know even little small tiny scars and old ankle sprains and injuries from when you were 5 and 6 matter. So we get a very, very thorough history. We run them through a movement screen. We want to see where are they most restricted in their movement to guide us where we might want to go based on their history. We also want to know what their pain and symptoms are and why they're in front of us for the session, so we can try to tie in history, symptoms, and their faulty movement for the corrections. Then we'll usually do 1 to 2 corrections on them depending on what we feel their nervous system can handle in the session. Some people are more emotionally involved than others, so we try to take that into consideration. We also don't want to do a whole bunch of corrections and they're not going to do their homework or their nervous system's not going to be able to handle it. So we generally stick to 1 or 2 corrections in the session, and then we spend a good 10 minutes or so going over their homework and really enforcing the why that they need to do their homework. If we need to video them on their cell phone doing their homework, write things up in kindergarten, draw artwork, whatever we have to do to help them understand their homework, because some people have a better understanding of their body and movement than others. And that's pretty much a start to finish session. And depending on what their history is, we would then schedule a follow-up maybe about a week out.
Okay. And then what's the time frame for that? Do you guys do like 60-minute sessions, or do you have a different
hour?
Okay, yeah. Okay,
we do an hour initially, and then we do have 30-minute or 60-minute follow-up options.
Okay.
And it really just depends on the person and what they might need outside of the NKT skill set. Maybe someone with like frozen shoulder, in their follow-up visit, we would do the neurokinetic therapy corrections and then also do some stretch therapy. or someone who's really weak, try to implement some strength training
Yeah.
for their home exercise program as well.
Okay. And then I don't know if you guys do this differently, or maybe you both do it the same way, but if, you know, a person comes in, new client, you said it's word of mouth, so they know it's kind of like the magic voodoo or something like that. But if they've kind of never heard of NKT or don't really know what you're going to do with them, how would you explain it with them? How do you help them understand? Or do you kind of just go into it and maybe you don't really explain to them?
Well, I think one of the first things we do is send them to the NKT website, neuroconnecttherapy.com. We want to give them that type of information so they can do as much research before they come in. However, a good portion of the people never do that. They never look at anything. We make sure that we let them know, look, we're not adjusting you. We're not going to be pulling and jerking on you or doing anything like that. We also make sure that they know that they need to come up with some history and stuff beforehand, so we're not spending 30 or 40 minutes going over history. And some of that can happen with a lot of the people that come in. What do you think?
Yeah, you know, ultimately we just try to kindergarten down what we're doing as much as we can. Of just basically saying that the reason you're presenting with this pain today, because most people come to us in pain. They've heard about us through the grapevine, because we've been in the Phoenix Metro for over 20 years. So most people come to us in pain, and we just try to explain that this is hurting probably from this old injury, and you've been running on this compensation pattern, and we're just going to figure out the pattern and teach you how to correct it yourself.
And we use a lot of analogies. I mean, not a lot of analogies. And it all depends on who you are. Which analogy am I going to use? Such as the alignment on your car. That's one that a lot of people can understand. If the alignment on your car goes out, what happens when you take your hand off the steering wheel? Most people know, oh, you go over to the side. And I say, yeah, with just a little bit of compensation, though, you can come back to the middle. And other than that, you really don't notice anything. Unless you leave that alignment on your car off for about 6 months to a year and you've been driving the car. And then I tell them, worst case scenario, you're in the middle of July, rolling up the 101 here, it's 105, and you blow that front tire out because it's been wore a whole lot more than the other ones. Take out a bus full of nuns. They kind of get it with those types of analogies. So I have a whole bunch of analogies that are in the bank. I really love it if they're a programmer, because then I can start talking to them in those types of analogies. But it all depends on the person. Analogies to me are extremely important. That helps them get it. Because you don't want to just start off saying, well, it's all in your head, even though it's all in their head.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that can really be essential, especially when people are kind of unaware of their bodies and it's hard for them to understand movements to begin with.
Yeah.
I like that phrase.
What does this scar on my forehead have to do with the fact that my foot is hurting?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, that takes some splaining, if you will.
That's good. When you guys were learning NKT and kind of really starting out with it, if you guys were working on people and you got to a point where you said to yourselves, oh gosh, I'm super confused right now, I don't know what I'm doing, how did you guys kind of reset or bring clarity to the situation? You know, for a lot of students, they get into testing, they go through, kind of like you were saying, Ken, you know, you would go through the arm clock and then it's like you would go too fast and confuse yourself. You know, for students who maybe get lost with their testing and get mixed results, can you give them any advice on kind of what to do to bring clarity to their mind, to reset the test, to sort of help them understand, okay, wait, how do I get rid of the confusion right now?
Well, one thing that I remember happening in the beginning is luckily most of my clients allowed themselves to be my guinea pigs, and a couple of my employees also allowed themselves to be my guinea pigs. Thank you to them. And my biggest thing was, all right, I found 20 muscles weak in the clear. Now what do? I can't find TL anywhere. Oh my God. So, you know, and I would try to think of what their history was that might guide me to it. And I'd still, you know, 10 minutes later, I'm still searching for TL. the gray box in the book helped a lot. I would say, okay, I got these 20 things off. What all of them have in common in the gray box? Try to help me. In my level 1, it wasn't really told to us, or maybe I just, checked out when it was told to us that, if you've got bilateral weaken to clear, go to the spine or go to the core. So that
Something
was
in the middle.
That was something huge that I learned later on. It might have been taught in my level 1. It might not. Like I said, sometimes you just glaze over and you forget half the stuff you learned. But that's really important, that when you have bilateral weaken the clear, to go to something in the middle. So that was probably my biggest thing. And, I can just say practice, practice, practice. The more you can get guinea pigs on your table and practice the different tests, feel how it feels different from one person to the next. Feel how one test on one side that you may not, it's like, I don't know about this. Go test the same muscle on the other side. And really feel the difference, so you can understand, well, yeah, that was weak in the clear compared to what this side's doing. Those were kind of learning blocks for me. But I think my biggest freak out moments in the beginning, because when I took level 1, we didn't have directional testing protocol. So I walked away with kind of go local, but really think global. So I'm all like, global, let's change the whole body. Let's test 40 muscles right now, which I learned not to do that later, because then I'm revving up all this dysfunction. But, in the beginning, I was testing 30, 40, 50 muscles. I want to know everything that crossed the hip, the knee, the shoulder, the neck. What was the core doing? I got all this weak in the clear stuff. Who's my TL? And then I'm like, oh, shit, now I'm out of time. What do I do? So...
Yeah. And, she mentioned it, the book, man, to other NKT practitioners. Do not be embarrassed or ashamed to break out the book in front of your clients. Be upfront about it. Other things such as the Essential Anatomy app that we have for our iPhone, not only for ourselves, but to show our clients. I think that is key as well. Yeah.
I really like using the app too, because sometimes you don't remember exactly where a certain muscle runs, and you want to make sure you're on those specific muscle fibers for TL, so you know what to fire up in your directional testing protocol. So the app's really good for you to make sure you're on the right set of muscle fibers. And 2, it's good to show the client, because they got to find those fibers too when they go home to do their homework.
Know the protocol. When you don't know the protocol, have it printed out in front of your face. As simple as it is, to be able to look at it and read through it is extremely helpful, especially when you're in a session and you are in kind of freak out mode. And know the antagonist. So some of those frames inside of the PowerPoint that each of us were given when we take the class are kind of important too. Print those out, have those up on a wall. Skye had one person that she was mentoring actually do her up a, I don't know, what do you call it?
Big poster board
storyboard kind of a thing that
That's
had a
cool.
lot of that stuff, and that I definitely used as a crutch as well in the beginning. But there's no shame in any and all of that. Having that stuff right in front of your face, I think, is important, and will make you less anxious when you're trying to think about, well, what can I do? What can I do? If you've got some kind of reference point to look at, okay, well, let me try this, 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 and this, and this.
Yeah.
And then if those things don't work, then you need to question, did you do it right? Was there enough time in between? Then you can go back and start reviewing that type of stuff, and it really helps, I believe.
Now, Skye, you said, I just have to follow this up here. You said that you had a few freak out moments. Do you have any that you could share? Maybe some really good stories or some failures, or working with a client and, oh no, I have no clue what I'm doing. Any good stories like that either of you guys could share?
Well, I have plenty.
Well, please
I can
do share.
tell you one one freak out moment, and this was when I was actually level 3. But some clients come to you and they got quite a little history, and I have a client who's very dear who actually fell into a chop box
Whoa.
and survived.
No way.
So you want to talk about someone having some scars?
Yeah.
I would say he's got close to 120 scars on his body.
No way.
Aside from falling into the chop box and surviving, he was in an explosion about 10 years later and has
What?
30% burns over his body, missing a few digits, had some reattached, had
See out of
one of his eyes was jacked.
No way.
Skin grafts. So, he comes in presenting, which I don't even know how he survived all this, but he did. They even cut him from sternum to pubis, pulled out most of his colon, and
No
put a
way.
bag in for 6 months, and then went back in later and reattached.
Wow.
So for him, I'm like, okay, most people come in, they've had like a C-section, woo, I got that, or had an appendix or whatever. And he had so many scars on his body. It's like, well, shit, where do I go first? Like, what scar do I even start with on this guy? And do I just correct one, or do I, I was totally at a loss for how to help him.
Wow.
I got lucky. About the third scar in was the one that gave me TL.
Oh, wow.
Luckily. And I told him at the beginning that, hey, scars are hierarchy in our world. They're a priority fix. And, so it may take me a minute. I usually explain to clients that my muscle tests give me clues that I need to try to figure out the pattern that I've got to correct. And I told him I knew it was done in the library with the rope, but I wasn't sure who did it yet as far as the game of Clue. And sometimes it takes me a while, but that was definitely a moment of I wanted to curl up in the corner and cry for a few minutes trying to figure out which scar to pick. Because, that's a unicorn. You don't get someone coming in every day like that.
Nope.
But luckily, he's been a really good client. We've got him dramatically better for what he does. He asked me how many sessions I thought he needed. And I told him maybe he wanted to send his wife through all 3 levels of training.
Oh, wow.
that might be the better fit. But he said, no, she's almost 80, so that's not going to happen.
Oh, wow.
So he just decided to buy one of our larger packages and come in and get the help he's needed. And he's pretty strong guy now. It's
solid.
Ken's been doing some personal training with him, and he's in his mid-60s, and he's probably stronger than some of our younger guys in the 20 and 30 clubs. So
Wow.
it's quite exciting to see his progress. But boy, was that first session
That's a doozy.
It was
Freak out.
It was definitely a freak out moment. I wanted to go home and just drink a whole bunch of wine and cry.
Yeah. I think that, NKT, helps people get through a lot of emotional issues by crying a lot. Yeah. Definitely.
Right. Yeah. I think I'm the one that went limbic in that session.
Yeah.
Not him.
Right. Oh, that's great. Well, guys, this has been super great. I just have a couple more questions I want to ask you.
Okay.
One is, and you guys have already mentioned a few things, but are there any really good resources that helped you understand NKT better? Kind of, books, or like you said, apps or different things that it's like, oh, once I learned this certain concept or this sort of other material or something, then NKT really started to click and come together for me. Are there any things like that you can share and recommend for students to kind of start learning?
Well, for me, Dr. Perry's primal movement class was pretty big time. And some of the concept, he teaches NKT and was one of the teachers for David. And he's got his own primal movement class with all the other things that he does. For me, learning his primal movement and some of those concepts of, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, I don't know if you've taken his course or not, but that really helped me have a deeper understanding of neurokinetic therapy and the effects that has on the body, and how doing neurokinetic therapy and then adding in the primal movements is a really good integration tool for the changes we were making in the nervous system.
Now, is he still teaching the primal movements? I thought he had kind of moved into, doesn't he do neuro frequency therapy? I might be saying that wrong, but is he, I know he's doing that now, but is he still
Oh
also
yeah.
doing primal movement?
There was some, I saw some discussion or whatever of him, other people, of him not doing it. And then some people freaked out, said, Dr. Perry, you got to do it. And he said, oh, don't sweat it. I'm still going to do primal movement. So as far as we know, he's still doing it.
Okay. If anybody watching knows that, you can comment about it below or something like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, somebody can clarify that for us.
I don't see how he could stop that, Gray Cook's book movement. Come on, huge, especially as far as that helped us put together other screens and stuff, adding into what we do. Other people, Adam Wolf, he came out and when we did some rock tape, he also did his course, and he had a few nuggets in there that were little additions and what have you. People like that. But Dr. Perry, I can't say enough good about Dr. Perry and the resources that we could lean back on. Those that taught us, Eric Nelson, Thomas Wells, those guys, for me, being able to ask a question and they give an answer was huge. Those above us have always been open and willing to help with that type of a thing and give a little bit of a different perspective. Obviously, the boards.
The Scholars page. Scholars page is big time.
And typing in whatever the symptom or the issue is, and reading everybody's post on it. That helps you get multiple different perspectives about it, and I think that's huge as well.
Yeah, the community is
David's
amazing.
blogs.
Absolutely.
I mean, come on.
David's blogs helped me just a month or two ago when I had a client presenting with dystonia, and read through the blog, and it was so cookbook it wasn't even funny. I mean, it was just everything he said in his blog was exactly what presented on the table with the client.
Wow.
So it really helped me help the client just from reading that blog. And I also remember first time I ever had a pelvic floor fix, and the pelvic floor was the facilitator, and I'm like, damn, how am I supposed to release the pelvic floor? Like, I'm not going there, right? And so I had a mini freak out moment, and then I said, well, let me just Google it, and I went to his blog, and he has a blog on the pelvic floor and what the anti-Kegel is. And I said, great, let's do the anti-Kegel and see what happens. And it totally worked. So thank God for that.
Great. That's funny.
Dr. Kathy Dooley has some really good blogs out there and videos on releases in areas that, aren't the easy go-to releases or activations, like her pelvic rocking video for the different pelvic floor, quadrants. So
Jory.
Yeah, Jory's Popliteus little YouTube video. Every time we have Popliteus as a compensator, we send a link right to his little how to stretch it on a yoga block, and that's part of their homework, and it makes it easy for us just to say this is exactly what you need to do, because most people coming to us don't even know they have a Popliteus.
No, yeah.
I would say also for every NKT practitioner out there, go to the Scholars page, and in the files, go watch the videos. Go watch the videos of the class. I probably have watched them 100 times. Every time I watch it, I get a little something more, So I think that's key too. There's a lot of resources right there within NKT and what David has provided that can help just about anybody with just about anything. And if there's not, ask.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, well, guys, you've shared some great advice today. If I could just ask you if there's anything that's worth repeating or anything that you don't want to have left unsaid, any last word of advice that maybe you could share with the students, what would that be?
Well, as someone who's been doing it for a while, and I've gone through all 3 levels, TA'd a lot, now I got to teach, yay. I would say, even though I'm where I'm at today, I didn't start out this way. I was very deer in the headlights, very nervous and skeptical and not sure what to do. And all I can say is practice, practice, practice. Find a study group. If you're all alone wherever you're at, see what study groups allow you to Skype in. Because I did have a guy, I think he was in Barbados, Skype in to our Phoenix study group. So we allow people to Skype into study group for those who don't have one. Hire a mentor if there is someone. Go shadow other people who do NKT. And as scary as you may feel on Monday coming out of the workshop, just dive in the pool and start swimming. Because even if you make a whole bunch of mistakes, there are going to be learning opportunities. And the more you can practice and mess up and learn from that and practice some more, the better.
And of course, test, don't guess. Right?
Well said.
Test, don't guess, because where you think it is, it ain't.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
Even now, I don't know what the temptation is to say, I know what this probably is going to be. And most of the time when I test, it's usually the opposite of what I thought it was going to be. So test, don't guess.
Well, that is a great note to end on. Guys, thank you so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure and an honor to speak to you.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Thank you.
It's nice.